Hello guys, so in this video we are going to finish our discovery and settlement of the New World study outline by continuing the discussion around Christopher Columbus and Cortez defeats the Aztecs. So let's start off by discussing the story of Christopher Columbus. And I want you to put away all of the stories you heard about Christopher Columbus growing up, because what I learned from taking a push 2 years ago is those stories that we hear growing up, like Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered the New World, is not true. And Christopher Columbus was a questionable character. So during the Middle Ages, Europeans knew little, if anything, about the existence of the Americas. Scandinavian voyages explored present-day Newfoundland around 1000 AD and made several attempts at colonization. Without dependable backing from strong nation-states, and in the face of a determined and violent opposition from native inhabitants, however, their fragile voyages were ultimately abandoned and forgotten. In Europe, territorial battles between Christians and Muslims dominated much of the period between the 11th and 14th centuries. By the middle of the 15th century, Europeans had grown accustomed to a variety of exotic Asian goods, including silk, drugs, perfume, and spices. However, Muslim forces controlled key passageways to the east and forced European tradesmen to pay huge sums for their wares. European customers, tired of the increasing prices, and demanded faster, less expensive routes to Asia. During this era, as city-states and emerging nations fostered a newfound enthusiasm for expansion and exploration, Christopher Columbus was born in the Italian port of Genoa. The son of a woolcumber, Columbus spent his youth learning his father's trade. By his teenage years, he became a seaman and took part in voyages to England and Ireland with Portuguese mariners. So, the people of England is looking for a faster, more inexpensive way to get to Asia. So that's their whole determination. And we start to see Christopher Columbus. Let's go for it. The invention of the printing press around the time made information sharing much easier. Journals describing experiences Many explorers, including the travels of Marco Polo to Asia about 300 years earlier, Europeans were captivated by his description and incredible wealth and golden pagodas. So they are becoming inspired because they see other explorers in other countries really digging the idea of going out in search of a new country, laying ground there, and becoming rich, basically. Columbus too became caught up in the excitement and read many books on navigation and geography. He eventually devised a plan to find a westward route to Asia. In 1484, he presented his plan to King John II of Portugal, but was denied financial support. He spent years asking the rulers of various countries, including France and England, for assistance because before Spain's Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand finally agreed to help. The monarchs wanted desperately to spread Christianity throughout the world and increase the Spanish presence over that of Portugal. Of course, the opportunity to acquire gold and riches influenced their decision as well. So, if you have not grasped that paragraph, please rewind 30 seconds and really read that paragraph because it really lays the foundation of what's going to occur later in the Americas. Because in this paragraph, it says the chief goals of the Spanish to go and travel to all these places was not to find a new trade route, which was the goal. It was to spread Christianity with the rest of the world. Okay. Once Columbus received the support he had been seeking so long, he surprised many by making a series of demands. Should he succeed on his voyage, he wanted to be knighted, appointed admiral of the ocean sea, and governor of any new lands he discovered, and awarded 10% of any profits generated by his expedition. The Spanish monarchs reluctantly agreed to his stipulations and provided Columbus with 3 small ships and a crew of about 90 sailors. On August 3rd, 1492, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria sailed from Palos in southern Spain. The fleet spent almost a month in the Canary Islands to make repairs and gather supplies. With the maintenance chores complete, Columbus continued his voyage west. Much like many sailors of the 15th century, Columbus's men were superstitious and wary of venturing too far from land. The weather remained fair for most of the journey, but crew members often pleaded with their leader to turn around and return home. Columbus refused. Then on October 12, 1492, as of exhausted sailors grew closer to mutiny. Lookout The lookout spied land from his perch atop the mast of the Pinta. He cries, "Land! Land! Terra! Terra!" echoed across the water to the crew of other ships. They discovered land. They have found the new world. Columbus led a party ashore, drove a flag into the ground, and called the new land Holy Savior. Although he was standing on an island in the Bahamas, Columbus was so positive that he had found the East Indies that he named the natives Indians. He then ventured on to Cuba, which he thought was China, and mistook Haiti for Japan. Thinking that he had retraced Marco Polo's footsteps, Columbus took what gold and natural resources he could carry aboard his ships back to Spain. The king and queen were impressed with his findings and agreed to fund more excursions to the New World. Although Columbus repeated his journey 3 more times, he refused to accept the evidence that the people, animals, and plants of the New World were nothing like those found in Europe or Asia. He remained convinced that he had discovered a new westward route to the Indies. So he lay convinced. So instead of going to Asia, he landed in South America. So back then, they didn't really think of the continent in between that Columbus laid on. Christopher Columbus's initial voyage to America whetted the appetites of many European countries. Power-hungry leaders sponsored many expeditions to the New World in the hopes that they would get a share of the riches. As travel between Europe and America became more frequent, small settlements and trading posts were established along the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, including present-day Florida through Central America. So all along the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic. Explorers discovered great amounts of precious metals and natural resources, but it was not enough to quench their growing thirst for more wealth. So now we see what's going to happen. We have a bunch of Western countries, England, Spain, France, all those competing for the same precious materials and natural resources found in the New World. In 1519, Hernan Cortez was commissioned by the governor of Cuba to expand the Spanish Empire into Mexico. Cortez, an aspiring conqueror, gathered an army of about 600 soldiers who shared his dreams of military glory and riches. During his journey to Mexico, Cortes encountered an Indian. Okay. She was fluent in several languages, including the language spoken by the Aztecs. Though Malinche's conversations with many people ruled by the Aztecs, Cortes learned that the capital was overflowing with gold and silver and other riches. He also discovered that the empire was riddled with conflict and turmoil, and he formed military alliances with local people who resented the Aztecs for their human sacrifices and forced tributes. So, what would you do when your country is counting on you to bring home these goods and precious metals and goods for your country, and you find out a huge ship has been carrying tons and tons of these materials? As Cortes approached Tenochtitlan, Emperor Montezuma II sent diplomats to meet the Spaniards with gifts. Cortes accepted the small tokens, but boldly told the Aztec ruler that he and his men had a disease of the heart that only gold could cure. Through apprehension, Montezuma welcomed Cortes into the capital because he believed that he was the legendary god, whose return was predicted to single final days of Tenochtitlan. Cortes and his men had Montezuma as a virtual predecessor, prisoner, and plundered the vast wealth of the region. Cortes, for example, forced Montezuma to provide Indian laborers who mined more gold. Although Cortes and his small army were greatly outnumbered, they could do most anything they desired because they ruled the empire through Montezuma. They also continued to enjoy the allegiance of non-Aztecs and controlled the more powerful military weapons, guns, swords, knives, and even horses, amazed and frightened the Aztecs. So this ruler sent from Spain, Cortes, was able to capture this wealthy nation through pulling hearts and strings, saying, gold can only cure this sickness. I'm here, I need gold. In 1520, the Aztec people, weary of this servile status and angry at Montezuma for his failures to protect them, attacked the Spaniards and drove them out of the city. Montezuma was killed, probably by his own people, during this uprising. Cortes, however, eventually regrouped and staged a bloody assault on the capital that lasted through much of 1521. The violent battles, combined with a smallpox epidemic that same year killed many Aztec warriors and caused the once powerful Aztec Empire to crumble. The great temples were destroyed and Christian churches were constructed in their place. So, he succeeded in conquering the Aztecs and fulfilling the goal of his people, which was to build Christian churches. So now Cortez is seen as a hero in the Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire grew rapidly after the fall of the Aztecs. Between 1522 and 1528, Spanish forces overpowered groups of Yukon and Guatemala. In the 1530s, Francisco Pizarro led a group of Spanish soldiers through Panama and into Peru, where they battled the Incas. The conquistador decimated the Incan Empire quickly and with relatively little effort because he and his warriors forced their fighting on the heart of the empire, the ruling family. Once the people realized that the Inca, to whom they pledged their allegiance, was no longer in control, they retreated and the empire collapsed. The Spaniards successfully carried out their plan to rule much of the New World. However, their greed and short-sightedness regarding the future of Americas eventually took its toll. So, that was the discovery and settlement of the New World. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you learned something. In the next couple of videos, we are going to talk about Europe and the impulse for exploration. Hope you join me.